Have you ever had a moment that completely shattered everything you thought you knew? That's what happened to James that rainy Tuesday afternoon. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more life-changing stories like this one. James stood frozen in the doorway of his apartment, the words, "I'm pregnant, and it's yours," still hanging in the air between them. But what Olivia whispered next would change the course of his life forever. "I need to tell you something else," she said, her voice barely audible over the sound of rain hitting the windows. "Something I've never told anyone." James had known Olivia for just 6 months. They'd met at a mutual friend's wedding, where James had been the best man and Olivia a bridesmaid. Their connection had been immediate and intense, the kind that makes you believe in fate. But they'd agreed to keep things casual. Both had been burned before, both carried scars from past relationships that had left them wary of commitment. Now here she was, standing in his apartment, telling him she was carrying his child. James felt the room spin. He wasn't ready to be a father. His career as an architect was just taking off. He had plans, dreams that didn't include midnight feedings and diaper changes. "You should sit down for this," Olivia said, her green eyes filled with an emotion James couldn't quite place. Was it fear? Sadness? He couldn't tell. James sank onto his couch, his legs suddenly unable to support his weight. Olivia sat beside him, leaving enough space between them that he could feel the distance like a physical presence. 3 years ago, she began, her voice trembling, "I was told I could never have children. A rare condition. The doctors were certain." She paused, twisting her hands in her lap. "That's why I never worried about protection with you. That's why this pregnancy is impossible." James stared at her, trying to process her words. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that according to medical science, I cannot conceive naturally. Yet here I am, pregnant. And you're the only person I've been with." The implication hung between them. A miracle? A medical anomaly? Or something else entirely? "There's more," Olivia continued, her voice dropping even lower. "The night I conceived, I know exactly when it happened, I had a dream. A strange, vivid dream about a child calling to me. Calling to us. And the next morning, I felt different. I knew something had changed." James ran a hand through his hair, trying to make sense of what she was telling him. He'd never been religious or spiritual. He dealt in concrete and steel, in blueprints and measurements. Not in miracles or prophetic dreams. "I know how this sounds," Olivia said, reading his expression. "I wouldn't believe it either if I weren't living it. But James, I've had 3 different doctors confirm both my condition and this pregnancy. They're calling it medically inexplicable." Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating Olivia's face. In that brief moment of stark light, James saw something in her eyes that made his heart stop. A certainty, a knowing that transcended logic. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Because you deserve to know the truth. And because—" She hesitated, then reached for his hand. "Because I believe this child is meant to be. That we're meant to be. I've never believed in anything more strongly in my life." James looked down at their joined hands. 6 months ago, he would have run from this conversation. He would have found a way to distance himself, to protect himself from the vulnerability that came with believing in something bigger than himself. But something had changed in him since meeting Olivia. She had awakened parts of him he thought had died years ago, when his mother passed away and his father retreated into alcoholism, leaving James to essentially raise himself from the age of 15. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "You don't have to say anything right now," Olivia replied. "I just needed you to know everything before you decide what you want to do." The rain continued to pour outside, creating a cocoon of sound around them. In that moment, despite the impossibility of their situation, James felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. "Can I think about this?" he asked finally. Olivia nodded, squeezing his hand before letting go. "Take all the time you need." But as she stood to leave, James found himself reaching for her. "Wait. Don't go. Not yet." She paused, looking down at him with those eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "I don't know what any of this means," he said slowly. "But I do know that meeting you was the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. Maybe ever." A small smile touched Olivia's lips. "It was for me too. So maybe." James took a deep breath. "Maybe this child, impossible as it seems, is part of that. Maybe some things don't need to be explained to be real." Tears filled Olivia's eyes. "That's what I've been trying to tell myself." James stood and tentatively placed a hand on her still flat stomach. "How far along are you?" 8 weeks, she whispered. 8 weeks. That would have been the night of the thunderstorm, when Olivia had shown up at his door soaking wet after her car broke down. The night they'd stayed up until dawn talking about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. The night James had first thought that maybe, just maybe, he could let himself love again. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Me too," Olivia said. "Terrified, actually." "But not alone," James added, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. Olivia's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to figure this out. Together. I don't know what it means or how it's possible, but I want to be there. For you. For the baby. For whatever comes next." The words felt right as they left his mouth. For the first time in years, James was making a decision based not on careful planning or self-preservation, but on what his heart was telling him. Olivia's face transformed, hope blooming across her features. "Are you sure?" "No," James laughed softly. "I'm not sure about anything. Except that walking away from you feels like the wrong choice." She stepped into his arms then, and as he held her, James felt something shift inside him. A door opening to a future he'd never imagined for himself. The next few months were a whirlwind. James and Olivia decided to move in together, converting his spare bedroom into a nursery. They attended doctor's appointments together, where medical professionals continued to be baffled by Olivia's pregnancy. "In my 30 years of practice, I've never seen anything like this," Dr. Chen told them during one visit. "By all accounts, your reproductive system shouldn't be able to support a pregnancy. Yet here we are, with a perfectly healthy fetus developing normally." James found himself researching similar cases, staying up late reading medical journals and forums where women shared stories of miracle pregnancies after infertility diagnoses. He discovered that while rare, there were documented cases of women conceiving naturally after being told they never would. But none quite like Olivia's. None where the medical evidence was so conclusive, the impossibility so clear. As Olivia's belly grew, so did James's attachment to both her and their unborn child. He found himself talking to the baby at night, his hand resting on Olivia's stomach, feeling the kicks and movements that proved this miracle was real. "I never thought I'd be a father," he confessed to Olivia one night as they lay in bed. "After how my own dad checked out when Mom died, I was afraid I'd do the same thing if life got hard." Olivia turned to face him in the darkness. "What changed?" James thought about it. I think I realized that being afraid of becoming my father was actually making me more like him. He ran away from his pain by drinking. I was running from mine by never letting anyone close enough to hurt me. And now?" Olivia prompted. "Now I'm still scared," James admitted. "But I'm more scared of missing out on loving you and this baby than I am of getting hurt." Olivia's smile in the moonlight was worth every moment of uncertainty. But their journey wasn't without challenges. At 5 months, Olivia began experiencing complications. Severe cramping sent them rushing to the emergency room in the middle of the night, both terrified they were losing the baby. "The placenta is showing signs of detachment," the doctor explained after examining Olivia. It's not uncommon in high-risk pregnancies, but given your condition, we need to be especially cautious. I'm putting you on bed rest for the remainder of your pregnancy. Bed rest meant Olivia had to take a leave of absence from her job as a kindergarten teacher. It meant James had to rearrange his work schedule to care for her. It meant financial strain and emotional stress as they navigated this new reality. One evening, after helping Olivia settle on the couch with books and snacks within reach, James retreated to the balcony of their apartment. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him. What if he couldn't provide for them? What if the baby didn't make it? What if Olivia resented him for the life she now had to live, confined to bed, dependent on him? As if sensing his thoughts, Olivia called to him from inside. "James? Can you come here?" He found her with tears streaming down her face, one hand pressed to her belly. "What's wrong?" he asked, panic rising in his throat. But Olivia was smiling through her tears. "Nothing's wrong. She's dancing. Our daughter is dancing." James placed his hand where Olivia indicated and felt a series of quick movements, like butterfly wings fluttering beneath his palm. "How do you know it's dancing?" he asked, his own eyes growing wet. "I just know," Olivia said simply. "The same way I knew I was pregnant before I took the test. The same way I knew you were the one for me the moment we met." In that moment, James understood something fundamental about the journey they were on. Some things couldn't be explained or rationalized. Some things had to be felt, experienced, believed. At 7 months, they received more concerning news. The baby was smaller than she should be, showing signs of intrauterine growth restriction. "We may need to deliver early," Dr. Chen warned them. "I want to give her as much time as possible to develop, but not at the expense of either her health or Olivia's." The next few weeks were a blur of twice-weekly doctor visits, constant monitoring, and sleepless nights. James threw himself into preparing for the baby's arrival, completing the nursery and taking infant CPR classes. Anything to feel like he had some control over their situation. Olivia, meanwhile, seemed to grow more serene as her due date approached. Despite the medical concerns, despite the discomfort of bed rest, she radiated a calm certainty that everything would be all right. "How can you be so sure?" James asked her one night as he massaged her swollen feet. "Because she told me," Olivia said, her hand resting protectively over her belly. "The baby told you?" Olivia nodded. "In my dreams. She comes to me, James. She has your eyes and my smile, and she tells me not to worry. That she's fought too hard to get here to give up now." James wanted to dismiss it as pregnancy hormones or wishful thinking. But he remembered Olivia's dream before she even knew she was pregnant. He remembered the impossibility of this pregnancy in the first place. And so he chose to believe. At 34 weeks, Olivia went into labor. It happened suddenly. One moment she was resting comfortably, the next she was doubled over in pain, a puddle of amniotic fluid soaking into their mattress. The drive to the hospital was the longest 20 minutes of James's life. Olivia's contractions came fast and hard, her face contorted in pain as she gripped his hand during red lights. "She's coming," Olivia gasped between contractions. "She's ready." At the hospital, things moved quickly. Too quickly. Words like fetal distress and emergency C-section floated around them as Olivia was whisked away to an operating room, James running alongside in scrubs hastily thrown over his clothes. "Her blood pressure is dropping," a nurse called out as they transferred Olivia to the operating table. "Baby's heart rate is decreasing," another voice announced. James felt the room tilt. This couldn't be happening. Not after everything they'd been through. Not when they were so close. "James," Olivia's voice cut through his panic. Her face was pale, her forehead beaded with sweat, but her eyes were clear and focused on his. "Remember what I told you. She's a fighter. We all are." Before he could respond, a curtain was raised, blocking his view of the procedure. He held Olivia's hand, whispering words of encouragement as the medical team worked with urgent efficiency on the other side of the barrier. And then, silence. A silence so complete it seemed to swallow the room. No cry. No announcement. Nothing but the beeping of monitors and the muffled voices of the medical team. James felt Olivia's hand tighten around his. Her eyes were closed, lips moving in what might have been a prayer. And then, finally, a sound. Small at first, then growing stronger. The unmistakable cry of a newborn entering the world. "She's here," the doctor announced, her voice thick with emotion. "She's small, but she's breathing on her own." A nurse appeared with a tiny bundle, placing the baby on Olivia's chest for just a moment before they would need to take her to the NICU. James looked down at his daughter for the first time. Tiny, red-faced, with a dusting of dark hair like his own. And when she opened her eyes, his eyes, just as Olivia had dreamed, something broke open inside him. A love so fierce and protective it took his breath away. "Hello, Mira," Olivia whispered, using the name they'd chosen together. Miracle. Because that's what she was. Mira spent 3 weeks in the NICU, growing stronger each day. James and Olivia practically lived at the hospital, taking shifts sitting beside her incubator, reading to her, singing to her, telling her the story of how she came to be. And finally, on a bright spring morning, they brought their daughter home. That night, as Mira slept in her bassinet beside their bed, James turned to Olivia in the darkness. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For believing. For making me believe too." Olivia smiled, tracing the line of his jaw with her finger. "I think Mira did that, not me." "Maybe," James conceded. "But you were brave enough to tell me the truth that day. About the pregnancy, about your condition, about your dreams. You could have kept it to yourself, tried to handle it alone." "I never considered that," Olivia admitted. "From the moment I knew I was pregnant, I knew I had to tell you everything. Even if you thought I was crazy. Even if you walked away." "I'm glad I didn't," James said, pulling her closer. "I knew you wouldn't," Olivia murmured against his chest. "That was in my dream too." As they drifted off to sleep, the sound of their daughter's soft breathing filling the room, James reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that rainy afternoon when Olivia had appeared at his door with impossible news, to this moment of perfect peace. He thought about the words she had whispered that day, the words that had changed everything. "This baby is a miracle. Our miracle. And I think she's trying to tell us something." Mira had indeed been trying to tell them something. That life doesn't always follow the plans we make. That some of the most beautiful things come from the most unexpected places. That love, real, enduring love, often begins with a leap of faith. As the years passed, Mira grew into a bright, intuitive child with an old soul. She spoke early, walked early, and seemed to possess a wisdom beyond her years. Sometimes James would catch her staring at the sky with a look of recognition, as if she were remembering something from before she was born. On Myra's 5th birthday, as they watched her blow out the candles on her cake, Olivia leaned close to James. "Do you ever wonder," she asked quietly. "About? About how she came to be. About what it means." James looked at their daughter, her face alight with joy as she opened presents surrounded by friends and family. He thought about the impossible journey that had brought her into their lives. The medical impossibility. The dreams. The sense of purpose that had guided them through every challenge. "I used to," he admitted. "But now I think some questions don't need answers. Some miracles just need to be lived." Olivia smiled, the same smile that had captivated him from the first moment they met. "That's exactly what she told me in my dream last night." James raised an eyebrow. "You're still having the dreams?" Olivia smiled, the same smile that had captivated him from the first moment they met. "That's exactly what she told me in my dream last night." James raised an eyebrow. You're still having the dreams? Not as often, Olivia admitted. But sometimes, when something important is about to happen, she comes to me. And what's about to happen now? James asked, a mixture of curiosity and concern in his voice. Before Olivia could answer, Mira bounded over to them, her dark curls bouncing with each step. Daddy, can we go to the beach tomorrow? I want to show you something. James exchanged a glance with Olivia, who gave him a small nod. Sure, sweetheart. What do you want to show me? Myra's eyes, his eyes, sparkled with excitement. It's a secret. But it's where the stars touch the water. That night, after Mira had fallen asleep surrounded by new toys and birthday cards, James found Olivia standing on their balcony, gazing up at the night sky. She wants to take us to the cove, Olivia said without turning around. The 130 miles north, where we've never been. James stepped beside her, wrapping an arm around her waist. How do you know? Because that's where I saw her in my dream. Standing at the edge of the water, pointing to the horizon where the stars seemed to meet the ocean. A shiver ran down James's spine despite the warm evening air. What does it mean? Olivia turned to face him, her expression serene. I think it means our story isn't over yet. I think Mira has more to show us. The next day, they drove to the secluded cove Olivia had described. James had looked it up, it wasn't on any tourist maps, barely accessible by a narrow hiking trail that wound down from the coastal highway. Mira led the way with confidence, as if she'd walked the path 100 times before. When they reached the small, crescent-shaped beach enclosed by towering cliffs, she ran straight to the water's edge. Here, she called back to them, pointing excitedly. This is where they come. James and Olivia followed more slowly, hand in hand, watching their daughter with a mixture of wonder and apprehension. Who comes, sweetheart? James asked as they reached her. Mira looked up at him with those knowing eyes. The others like me. The ones who had to try extra hard to get here. Olivia knelt beside her daughter, sand sticking to her jeans. What do you mean, Mira? The little girl placed a small hand on her mother's cheek. Some babies have to fight really hard to find their parents. I was looking for you for a long time before I found you. James felt his throat tighten with emotion. He knelt on Myra's other side, forming a small circle at the edge of the gentle waves. Is that why the doctor said Mommy couldn't have babies? He asked softly. Mira nodded solemnly. Sometimes the path gets blocked, and we have to find another way. I had to be very strong and very patient. Tears filled Olivia's eyes. And the dreams? That was me, Mira said simply. Calling to you. Telling you not to give up. James looked out at the horizon, where the setting sun was casting a golden path across the water. In the distance, the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. And why did you want to bring us here? He asked. Myra's face lit up with a smile that transformed her from wise beyond her years to simply a joyful 5-year-old. Because this is where I waited. And because. She trailed off, her attention caught by something over James's shoulder. He turned to follow her gaze and saw a young couple making their way carefully down the trail to the beach. The woman was visibly pregnant, one hand supporting her lower back, the other gripping her partner's arm for balance. Because they need to know too, Mira whispered. As the couple reached the beach, the pregnant woman paused, her free hand moving to her belly. Her eyes scanned the shoreline until they landed on Mira. Even from a distance, James could see the recognition that passed between them, an impossible, inexplicable recognition. The woman whispered something to her partner, and they changed direction, walking toward James, Olivia, and Mira. I'm sorry to bother you, the woman said as they approached. But, have we met before? Your daughter looks so familiar to me. Mira stepped forward, reaching out to touch the woman's rounded belly. She's been looking for you for a long time too, she said. She almost gave up, but then she found the way. The woman's eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth. How did you? She turned to her partner. David, that's exactly what I saw in my dream. Those exact words. David looked bewildered but placed a supportive hand on the woman's shoulder. Rachel's been having these vivid dreams throughout her pregnancy, he explained to James and Olivia. The doctors said it was just hormones, but you knew it was more, Olivia finished for him. You knew your baby was trying to tell you something. Rachel nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. They told us we'd never conceive naturally. 5 years of trying, 3 failed IVF attempts. And then, suddenly, miraculously. A positive test, James said. And dreams you couldn't explain. How did you know? David asked, his expression a mixture of suspicion and hope. James looked at Olivia, then at Mira, who was now drawing patterns in the sand with a stick, humming softly to herself as if her work here was done. Because we've been where you are, James said. And we'd be happy to tell you our story, if you'd like to hear it. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars emerged in full force above them, the two couples sat on the sand while Mira played at the water's edge. James and Olivia shared their journey, the impossible pregnancy, the dreams, the challenges, and the indescribable joy that had followed. Rachel and David listened with growing amazement, occasionally interjecting with details of their own experience that mirrored James and Olivia's so closely it couldn't be coincidence. But what does it mean? David asked finally. Is it spiritual? Scientific? Some combination we don't understand yet? James watched Mira, silhouetted against the starlit ocean. I think it means that life finds a way. That love is more powerful than medical diagnoses or statistical probabilities. And that our children choose us as much as we choose them, Olivia added softly. As if on cue, Mira ran back to them, her small face alight with joy. Look, she exclaimed, opening her hand to reveal a perfect sand dollar. A gift from the sea. She presented it to Rachel, who accepted it with trembling hands. Thank you, she whispered. Keep it close, Mira instructed seriously. It will help her remember the way home when she's born. That night, as they drove back home with a sleeping Mira in the back seat, James reached for Olivia's hand across the console. Do you think there are others? He asked quietly. Other children like Mira, finding their way to parents who were told they couldn't have them? Olivia gazed out at the star-filled sky. I think there are more miracles in this world than we'll ever understand. And I think Mira is going to help some of them find their way. Our daughter, the miracle guide, James said with a soft laugh. It makes a certain kind of sense, Olivia mused. Who better to light the path than someone who's walked it before? In the rearview mirror, James caught a glimpse of Myra's peaceful sleeping face. In that moment, he felt a profound gratitude for the impossible journey that had brought her to them. For Olivia's courage in sharing her truth that rainy afternoon 6 years ago. For his own decision to believe in something he couldn't explain. As they pulled into their driveway, Mira stirred in her car seat. Daddy, she murmured sleepily. Yes, sweetheart. There are going to be more. And they'll need us to tell our story. James met Olivia's eyes across the darkened car, seeing in them the same certainty he felt in his heart. Then we'll tell it, he promised. As many times as needed. And they did. Over the years, their story spread, first through Rachel and David, then through others who found their way to that small cove with impossible pregnancies and inexplicable dreams. James and Olivia became reluctant guides for couples navigating the same miraculous journey they had traveled. Mira grew into a compassionate young woman with an uncanny ability to connect with children, eventually becoming a pediatrician specializing in high-risk infants. She never lost her connection to what she called the star children, babies who had fought against impossible odds to find their way to the parents who were waiting for them. On Myra's 25th birthday, James found himself once again standing on the balcony of their home, now gray at the temples but with the same sense of wonder that had entered his life the day Olivia had whispered those life-changing words. "Penny for your thoughts," Olivia said, joining him with 2 glasses of wine. James accepted one with a smile. "I was just thinking about how different our lives would have been if you hadn't had the courage to tell me the whole truth that day. If you'd kept your dreams to yourself, or if I'd been too afraid to believe." Olivia leaned against him, her head fitting perfectly against his shoulder as it had for 25 years. "I think Mira would have found another way to reach us. She's stubborn, like her father." James laughed. "And intuitive, like her mother." Inside, they could hear the sounds of the birthday party, Myra's voice rising above the others as she told a story, followed by laughter. Among the guests were Rachel and David with their daughter Lily, now 20, and at least a dozen other families whose impossible children had found their way to them over the years. "Do you ever regret it?" James asked suddenly. "Taking this path? Becoming part of something so much bigger than we ever planned?" Olivia looked up at him, her eyes still as clear and certain as they had been that rainy afternoon when everything changed. "Not for a single moment. How could I regret being part of a miracle?" James kissed her then, as tenderly as he had the first time. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For whispering those words that changed my life forever." If you've enjoyed this story of miracles, love, and the unbreakable bonds that connect us, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories that touch the heart and awaken the soul. Remember that sometimes the most beautiful journeys begin with impossible news and a whispered truth that changes everything.